Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Ellen, and I'd like to welcome everybody joining us today. I'm going to talk about multitasking today. And if you're a busy person, you're probably very familiar with multitasking. So I'm going to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages and a lot of information about what research tells us about multitasking. So if you're a busy person, you're going to get a lot of information today that I hope will help you balance all of the different responsibilities and activities in your life. I know we're all juggling lots of things. And so we're going to talk about how to be more efficient and productive when we're doing all of these activities and trying to keep everything straight. So first, I want to welcome everybody. And I want to invite you to tell me in the chat where you're from, because I love knowing where I reach people. So I'm from New York City. So that's where this is coming from, New York City. And again, please, if you can put in the chat where you're from, I love to know where we reach people and who's listening. So, and if you're watching this on replay, by the way, please put in the chat where you're from also. We have Ivy from Brazil City. Wow. Welcome, welcome. So happy to have you with us. And I see we have a few other people who are joining in also. So happy to have everybody with us live, and also if you're joining on replay. So again, I hope everybody's having a nice day, a pleasant, exciting day, and that wherever you are, that it's a beautiful day or evening. Right now it's evening where I am, but wherever you are, I hope you're having a good day or a good afternoon or a good evening. So I'm going to get started. Why don't we dive right in on our topic of multitasking? So again, as I said, if you're a busy person, I know you're probably familiar with multitasking. Our society is consumed with multitasking because we're all so busy. We're on our cell phones. We're watching on our computers. We have papers in front of us. And in our minds, we're running through 4 or 5 or 6 different activities that we have to take care of. And so there's so much responsibility, so much on our minds. And why do we multitask? Well, I think there's so much on our minds and we want to get it all done. So we think instead of one thing or a second thing just to focus on, I'm going to do a lot. I'm just going to try and do everything. And so we start doing a lot of things. And multitasking sounds a little bit appealing because we think, well, instead of just doing one thing, I'm going to get a lot done at the same time. So it's appealing to us. We think we're going to be more productive and more efficient. And I'm going to talk about the research and about whether that really bears out, whether we really are more productive and efficient or not. But again, the first thing to know about multitasking is instinctively, it feels like a topic that would really work, that would really help us, that would make us more efficient and more effective. And when I think about multitasking, I think in my mind, I have an image of a juggler who's juggling lots of pins around. And then somebody throws more pins to the juggler. And you see the juggler take on more and more pins, more and more responsibility, and more stress. And they're handling it, but they're under a lot of stress handling all that juggling. And eventually, if somebody throws too many pins in, what happens? It falls. Everything falls apart. And that's the way I think of multitasking. We try to handle one thing and 2 things and 3 things and more. And if we only had one thing to do, it wouldn't be stressful. If there was only 1 or 2 things, it wouldn't be stressful. But when it comes to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or more, and we're trying to keep track of everything, that's when eventually things fall apart. It's stressful. We can't really handle everything when there's so much stimuli, so much information to keep track of. And when we have a lot of things on our calendar or on our to-do list, we start thinking, how am I going to get it all done? How am I going to handle all of this? And that's when we start multitasking and think, I'm going to be so productive today. I'm just going to do everything. But here's what the research says. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research. And the first thing is how the brain handles activities when we're multitasking. So when we multitask, we really think we're handling 1 or 2 or 3 things at the same time. So if you think about your brain like a computer operating system, we think our brain is like handling 1 or 2 or 3 computers side by side, doing all of these activities at the same time. But the brain is not wired to act like that. The brain doesn't function like that. What the brain does, the brain has an attention mechanism. It's called the reticular activating system. And it filters all of the stimuli, all of the information coming in, and it puts a spotlight on the one activity that you should pay attention to. And that's what we really refer to as attention, as paying attention. Our brain focuses and picks attention, but it picks attention on one thing, not multiple things like 3 computers side by side. So we don't really do multiple activities at the same time. What we call multitasking is really sequential tasking. We're really going back and forth. We're not focusing on one activity. We're focusing and going back and forth all around and trying to handle multiple things. And that's really called sequential tasking or switch tasking. Again, we're going back and forth. And what does that mean? What's that experience in the brain like? Well, what happens is when we switch from one activity to the next activity, as we go to the next activity, the brain has to orient and pick up the information. What's this new activity? What am I up to? What am I doing? And so there's a little lag when we're switch tasking and picking up the new activity. It takes the brain, there's a little delay in getting it started. And I like to call that the new activity delay. And in addition to that, the brain was doing a previous task, and it takes a little while for the brain to let go of the activity that it was doing. And that's called attention residue. I like to call that the old task delay. So when you switch tasks, there's a new task delay and an old task delay. And that adds up. And that's just an example when you switch an activity one time. But during the day, if you go back and forth during various activities, if you add up all those delays of all that task switching, you waste a lot of time and energy during the day doing that. And so the result is that the research shows that when people try to multitask, they're actually less efficient, they're less productive than if they were to do one activity at a time. Again, because you're getting all these combined delay factors when you're switching back and forth over time. And the research also shows that when people multitask, you get more errors. Again, because you're trying to go back and forth and keep track of everything, and it gets confusing at times. So people make errors that they probably wouldn't make if they were focusing calmly on one single event. Another piece of research about multitasking, and I think this one's really, really interesting, is there are people who think they're really good at multitasking, and some people who think, I'm just not good at multitasking. And they've compared the productivity and error rates of people who think they're good at multitasking and people who say they're not good at multitasking. And you know what? The people who think they're good at multitasking make as many or more errors than people who admit that they find it challenging. And they're just as unproductive and inefficient as people who say they really can't do it. I think what people are really thinking when they say I'm good at multitasking, they're just thinking, I do this all the time, so I think I'm good at it. Because again, we're a society and we're used to multitasking. And if you think about the juggling example, when you watch a juggler juggling pins, they might juggle for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, perhaps. But imagine trying to juggle 3 or 4 hours a day, or all day, or juggling your whole life. It's really stressful. And that's another thing that the research shows, that multitasking is really stressful. It puts a lot of stress on people, and there are much higher stress rates. And in addition to the stress, when we're under stress, so there's stress in the mind, but the mind creates links to the body. And there are also higher levels of stress hormones in the body, like cortisol. So multitasking has results that go in our mind as well as our body. And when we have stress hormones in our body, that has consequences to our body and to long-term health. So for a particular activity, if there are more stress hormones present, for example, blood pressure may go up, or other systems may respond in stressful ways. And long-term, that can have effects on the heart, other organs of the body, other parts of the body and functions, autoimmune diseases, and other conditions. So multitasking has a lot of consequences. And again, we talked a lot about being less efficient, about being more stressful. So the other result of multitasking is that it affects, we talked about the reticular activating system and how that helps us spotlight. It really helps us focus on activities. But when you overload your system, when you overload the reticular activating system, it becomes less efficient in filtering out irrelevant information in the environment, in helping you focus on what's really relevant, what you need to know. And so again, you have a negative consequence. And long term, when people multitask, sometimes they start complaining, I have trouble focusing, I can't focus, because your brain gets so used to being overloaded and not being able to detect the relevant information. So we talked about a lot of the consequences of multitasking and a lot of the negative effects. But I don't want to just leave you with the negative effects. I want to give you a good outcome. So if you want to avoid multitasking, what's a better strategy? And the research suggests, with all the negative consequences of multitasking, that a really good outcome is brought by what's called singular tasking. Instead of multitasking on everything, focus on one activity, one task at a time. And again, that's called singular tasking or solo tasking. And that's really a change for so many people because, again, as I mentioned, we're a society where we're used to multitasking and juggling activities. So it may take a while to try solo tasking or singular tasking again. And I do want to mention that, so if you try it and if you find it challenging, you won't feel like you're isolated or it's you or that it's something different for you. It's really common, especially for people who have the habit, who are in the loop of sequential tasking. So if you're having trouble singular tasking, and a lot of my clients come to me and tell me that, they tell me, you know, I'm just having trouble focusing. I'm not used to focusing. So something that can really help is go to some activities that you've done that you're used to, where you do singular focus, where you singular task. Like if you've done meditation or some types of relaxation techniques like yoga. And try to do that and try to teach yourself again the importance and what it feels like to single task. Of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me. And I'll have some links in the comments in the chat box about how you can reach out to me if you'd like some help on this, because it can be challenging. And I do want to help people become more productive and efficient and empowered and successful in their lives. So again, if you're finding it challenging, I'm happy to have a chat with you and help you. So again, singular tasking is really a better technique. I also want to tell you, though, there are some instances when multitasking can work. So I want to share that with you as well. So you can wash dishes and listen to music. You can wash your car and listen to music. You can exercise on a stationary bicycle and watch a video, or exercise on a treadmill and watch a video. So those types of activities work. So why is it that those work and some of the others that I talked about don't work and make you inefficient and less efficient? So what happens is that if activities are competitive in the brain, if they use the same areas of the brain, it really becomes difficult to combine the activities. But if you're washing dishes or washing your car and listening to music, that's really different areas of the brain. So those types of activities can work. And the other thing is, if you're working on activities that take a lot of cognitive work, a lot of logical reasoning in your brain, and you're doing multiple activities that take a lot of brain power, that's difficult. That's stressful. That's when you get less efficient and less productive. Because again, you're working to try to keep it all going, to keep everything together, to keep all your facts straight about what you're doing. But if you're working on activities that aren't competitive and are working in different areas of your brain, then it's much easier to keep those activities going. So I want to also mention a combination of two activities that sometimes is very stressful, and it could even be dangerous sometimes, not always. So I know a lot of people drive a car and talk on a cell phone. And if you're just having a casual conversation, that can be fine. But when it can become difficult is if you're driving your car and having conversations about work, where you're really using your brain power and thought processes and logic and reasoning. And you're doing that while you're trying to keep safe in your car, and you're looking at your field and trying to make sure all your cues are safe. So that can be difficult. And those competitive activities, which are using the same logical reasoning areas in the brain, can be difficult to combine. So I like to tell people, be really careful about whether you choose to combine activities like that. So again, I just want to review. We talked about multitasking. We talked about how it's really not multitasking, but it's sequential tasking or task switching, and how a preferred strategy is singular tasking, solo tasking. We talked about how multitasking really gets in the way of efficiency. It makes us less productive, less efficient. We make more errors. We're under more stress. We have increased stress hormones in our bodies. Our focus system can go awry. So when you can try to singular task, it's really, really helpful. So if you're watching this on replay, I hope you're going to put in the comments and tell me what was a tip that you found really helpful today. Was it that multitasking is really sequential tasking, or that a good strategy is singular tasking? So let me know in the comments. And also, if you have any topics that you'd like me to talk about in weeks coming up, let me know. I like to be responsive to topics that people are interested in. So again, if you have any topics, I'm open to hearing your topics. If you'd like to reach out to me, feel free to. We're going to have a link in the chat box and in the comments below. And you're welcome to email me as well. I really try to be accessible because I'm really very passionate about helping people become their best, about optimizing your function and being peaceful and happy and successful at work and home. So feel free to reach out to me if you wanted to make an appointment, a phone appointment. And I made my email address really easy. It's ellenwillhelp@gmail.com. So that's pretty easy to reach me. Again, feel free to reach out if I can be of help to you. If you're watching this on YouTube, and if you find it helpful, I'm going to ask you to do two things. One, to hit the like button, and second, to subscribe so that you can benefit and know when I have new videos that come out. And I want to invite you to join me again next Sunday at the same time. I'm going to talk again about another topic. And again, if you have a suggestion for a topic, I always like to address what people are interested in. So I will see you next Sunday. And until then, be strong, be empowered, and let's talk again soon.